Well, hello and welcome to the Bitcoin Reformation Podcast. We are three pastors, down one pastor today. Jared is not with us, but back after a bit of an absence is our dear friend Ben Haupt. So, Ben, welcome back to you here at the Bitcoin Reformation Podcast. Just like the name implies, we are very interested in talking about Bitcoin. It is not maybe the most interesting, not at all the most interesting thing in our lives. I know we would say certainly what God has done for us and all the world. That Christ Jesus is the most interesting, and probably following close behind, we would want to talk about wife and children, family life, this type of thing. But we go about this podcast because it's a conversation that hasn't, quite frankly, broken into many of the circles that we swim in or live and breathe in, particularly in the world of the church, in the world of Lutheran. The Lutheran land, I guess you could say. So, with all that, again, welcome back to Bitcoin Reformation Podcast. Ben, how have you been? It's been a while. Give us a rundown.
Yeah, I've been great. Thank you, and great to be back on the show. I saw that Jared asked a couple of episodes ago, or alluded that maybe we were close to getting Matt, or you guys were close to getting me back on the show, and I thought, man, let's seal the deal. Then I was sad to hear that it wouldn't quite work out for Jared's schedule, but this is the time to record because it's been a busy season for me at PLI. We are in the midst of really giving significant new direction to the organization and solidifying it with partnerships with financial donors. And so I've been on the road a whole bunch, which has been a ton of fun. God's people are very, very good, and have been very good to PLI, to 1517, and to many other great organizations doing the work of ministry and the church. Family-wise, things are really great. Selena is just finishing up school. We're recording this at the beginning of June, and Selena's still finishing up here with school, so that's been really good. And the boys are home from Aiden, our oldest, is home from college. He's got an internship with an organization called VAT19 and has enjoyed working with them. They're a YouTube video producer, and Noah just got his driver's permit. Aiden and I went to a thing last weekend called Tremendicon in Springfield, Missouri, and met an artist that he has long wanted to meet. And lo and behold, this artist is a Christian. And we had some fantastic conversations, and Aiden was kind of smitten with celebrity, and this guy has reached out a couple of times by text this past week, and I'm in conversation with him. Aiden's in conversation with him. We're talking about art, books on art and faith, and it's just been a delightful conversation. So life is really good for us. How are things for the Ruffners?
Yeah, things are going well for us. Since you and I last talked, not maybe since the last time we recorded, but our oldest graduated from Concordia Irvine. Your oldest finished his first year at the same school. So,
Yeah.
and graduation was great. You'll get to experience that someday. In COVID time, they went to this like graduation that wasn't a lot of people in one space. You basically walk through the campus, you get a time, and you walk through, and Jed was with his friends in front and behind, and you kind of walk through the different colleges of the university, meet the professors in full regalia. And honestly, it was a little less formal than on that whole front end, but you got to meet professors and see our younger kids got, in a sense, a chance to see Jed's whole world there through friends, families, professors. One professor there was Kit Nagel. This is Norm Nagel's son, if you can believe it.
Right.
Yeah, I'd never met him, didn't know he was there. Mike Eschelbach, others. It was a joy. So he graduated. He's back in Michigan at Camp Arcadia for the summer working.
Okay.
which is something we had always dreamed of for him, and he is
Yeah.
having a blast.
That's
So
awesome.
that's Jed. Levi turns 20 today, so
Wow.
he was hitting the driving range with a buddy. We're grilling out some tri-tip a little bit later, and just having
Nice.
a good evening with him, hopefully. And then the other two, the younger two, are still finishing up school. They get done next Thursday. So we're recording on a Friday. Next Thursday, they will be done. And then summer begins. Megan's great. Yeah, things are going well, Ben. Things are going well.
That's great. Is the tri-tip the famous Ruffner method of the reverse sear?
Yeah, yeah. Not only reverse sear, but today I might hang it for a few hours in the pit barrel cooker, which again
Wow.
was low and slow, and bring it up to
Yep.
temperature, and then get kind of a blazing fire going in the old Weber kettle and finish it up with this year. That's right. You had tri-tip here one
Well,
time.
yeah,
I
I've
nearly
had it
forgot.
at the Ruffner
Yes.
abode.
Well, get this.
Yeah.
This was not only the
Nice.
request of the birthday kid, but tri-tip here this week was $4.99 a pound on sale, which means
Wow.
tri-tip steak. It's kind of a poor man's steak, but the way we treat it and everything, it's really delicious. But it's
Yep.
at 4.99 a pound. It's cheaper than ground beef this week up here on
Yeah.
the mountain
I was
here.
gonna say that's about as cheap as like
Yes.
ribs or
Right,
pork
right.
butt.
Exactly, exactly. So the price was
Yeah.
right. It's a beautiful full afternoon, and we'll do all of that. So things are well. Well, here we are. We're going to talk Bitcoin. As per always, this is not financial advice. We would want to win you over, particularly to think about money, to consider Bitcoin, and even more importantly, still, hopefully, some portion of this conversation will commend you back to that which is truly certain and lasting, which is your life with God through Christ Jesus, his Son. But none of this being financial advice. This is entertainment, as they say, and more than entertainment, it's a joy to be with you, Ben. So, do we want to talk the book first or the state of Bitcoin first? Your choice.
Yeah, maybe let's set it up this way. So this is maybe we'll start with some church stuff. Um, I will say I've been in the headlines a bit. Few folks have been noticing some of the things that I've said, some of the things that I've spoken about on other podcasts, and there was a Facebook post that was written about me very specifically by name a couple months back, and alleged that I was a Marxist. And
Wow,
I want to just come right out and say
I didn't know
um,
that.
that is so far from the truth. In fact, if you've paid attention to any of this Bitcoin Reformation podcast, Marxism and Bitcoin just do not thrive together. They are about as far opposite as what you could get, I think. So no, I ended up being named in a couple of reports, and I've been reading this book um, that really is in some ways kind of I'm developing some response to critics kind of ideas, and I came across this book, and it really solidified for me kind of a way of thinking. I will say, I know we're not supposed to talk about religion or politics or anything like that, but this is the show to do it on. So I will say, politically, I've become more and more libertarian over the years. I still think that ethics are very important, and that's maybe where I diverge a little bit from maybe a classic libertarian that would just be like, "Don't tread on me and don't shove your ethics down my throat." But I do appreciate the human's ability to regulate their own affairs by and large, and I resonate very much with liberty as a concept. I think it's good, and I think it's God pleasing. So I read this book, and it just so resonated with so much of my kind of philosophy on life, my philosophy and thinking on the church, my own thinking about my own finances and Bitcoin. And so, yeah, let's dive into this book. So I'm going to hold this up, and I think if I hold it up right,
There it is.
my camera will capture it. There it is. It's called Virtue Politics by James Hankins. The subtitle is Soulcraft and Statecraft in Renaissance Italy. And not to give away too much of the book, but it's basically soulcraft as opposed to statecraft. At least that's how I would interpret Hankins. And so let me just give my quick summary, and then I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and questions. So basically what Hankins is doing in this book is going back to the Renaissance, and that term Renaissance, it means rebirth. Renescere in Latin is to be reborn or to be revived. And the whole thing about what was going on with the Renaissance, people probably know this term, maybe would think of like Michelangelo or somebody like that being part of the Renaissance. But Jim Hankins takes this even further back to people like Petrarch and Patrizzi and some of these political thinkers. Maybe some listeners have tuned into the Medici show, which isn't exactly the most godly show under the sun, but the Francesco Medici was a Renaissance humanist. At any rate, it's this group of thinkers that in the 14th century, in the 1300s and into the 1400s, start to say, we want to see a rebirth in society. And who of us wouldn't want to see that today? In fact, would love to see, we hear the word revitalization sometimes used in the church. I think that they were very much interested in revitalizing church and society and even politics. So what these Renaissance humanists like Petrarch and Patrizzi and such did was they got into reading old texts, and they became convinced that the way to transform society was specifically not to get some power for oneself. Instead, what they decided that they would do is get into education and reading good texts and teaching virtue, teaching ethics and kind of timeless principles. Hankins has a whole section, sort of an argument against Machiavelli. And Machiavelli had this very opposite mindset that, like, get as much power as you can for yourself because the world is a dark place and you may need to use it. Ends justify the means kind of thing. And so Machiavelli is not ever usually talked about as a virtuous kind of person. So I'm going to tie this to Bitcoin a little bit later, but I first want to just kind of talk about what Hankins is doing in the book. By the way, Hankins does not talk about Bitcoin at all. He does have quite a room for matters of faith, and Hankins is himself a believer, I believe, and he's very sympathetic to the role of religion, the role of Christianity in particular, and how important it is for soulcraft. So these virtue politicians were interested in transforming society by educating souls rather than getting a bunch of Machiavellian state power and trying to mess with constitutions and bylaws and amassing power for oneself to sort of force the change in society. So let me pause there and say that's kind of a first stab at what the book is about.
Well, Ben, as you say that, I can imagine how that intersects with a lot of things. I think it intersects with the general climate in American political life. I think it intersects then as well, for those who would know it, to conversations, concerns, efforts, and that's representing different sides, but within the denomination of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And by the way, if I can put a pause and go back to where you started, it was 3 years ago when the organization I served was in the spotlight for some reason, amazingly so. So congratulations and thank you for taking the spotlight, I guess. And my grandma once told me that if I wanted to fly with the eagles, I needed to quit hanging out with the turkeys. So I don't know. I don't know exactly how that fits into this conversation and hanging out with you, Ben. But we'll see. We'll see if I can't get my name somewhere. Probably not with this conversation. But anyways, thank you for being principled. Thank you for being open to discussion in all things. Thank you for trying to shed light and not just heat. So I can say that and put some of that aside. But yes, I can imagine. It's so amazing, right? Who would have thought? I would have thought. I did not start my day thinking I'll learn something about the Italian Renaissance, and boy, it will resonate with the moment. Now, of course, history has a way of doing that, beautifully so. And humility on our part should probably send us back to history more often, at least, than I go to history. But I think that's what you've tapped into here, because I started the day. We weren't sure that we could record. Once we figured out we could record, Ben, what do you have interest in? Because you haven't been on in a while, and you say, this book, just finish it, let's talk about this. And now as you're giving it to us, and really to me even for a first time, it does resonate. You've got atrophy, you've got fear, and now you have decisions to make. One typically doesn't like the idea of standing by idly. Decisions need to be made. Decisions themselves have consequences, both intended and unintended. Oh boy. But beyond that, we typically start from some philosophical or theological or combination footing as we head towards decisions. And that theological and philosophical footing has to do with the moment we're in, what's taken place, and then what can be done. I actually like kind of how you've framed things, with particularly you brought up Machiavelli, and I understand the author does then as well, that if the world truly is that dark, then give me one decent, I'll even just say that, decent prince, and let me vest him with power. And at least then we can survive today, shielded from some of that darkness. Maybe in this cloister over here, we can have a dim light, but at least that's better than the darkness outside. That's not a footing of hopefulness, I wouldn't say. And if the world is that bleak, I suppose even I would be drawn to that. But is the world that bleak, right? On the one hand, from ashes we have come, and to ashes we will return. And what's the problem with this world? Well, I am, and you are, Ben, and everybody else is. So, and you might look at Lutheran theology, by the way, which talks about total depravity, and a deep. When we talk about the fall, we believe humanity fell pretty darn far. Our anthropology is a pretty low anthropology, and yet we do not walk around or live as those without hope, right? In the face of death, we do not grieve as those without hope. This is First Thessalonians, or it is first or second, but it's Paul there. And in the face of, if that's true in the face of death, Ben, then I want to think that in the face of life, in the day-to-day, how much more then with a God who is present and active and has his gifts, both for, he has specific gifts related to the gospel, related to salvation, life, forgiveness, and salvation in Christ Jesus, for all who will receive it. But he also has gifts for all the world. We would call those first article gifts, here and now. He has not left us as orphans in either realm, right? So I think we would agree, and it's not a full-fledged argument. I'm proffering this and not really fully arguing it, but that we don't live in a hopeless world, and as such, we don't have to at least fall into the Machiavellian camp. And I'll stop there and let you take it up.
No, I think I think one read of Machiavelli would be the world is so dark, and so join Machiavelli down in the mud of the pigsty, and who's not going to get a little mud on them in this time. The Renaissance humanists, I mean, they're coming out of the Dark Ages. We're living in some would argue a much more enlightened time than they were, and yet I would say that people wouldn't be wrong if they looked about and thought that maybe we were going back into the Dark Ages. There's a lot of problems on the horizon. I've always loved Lutheran theology's ability to talk about really hard things with the theology of the cross. And yet I totally agree with you, David. That doesn't lead us to despair, and it doesn't lead to Machiavellian kind of nasty politics either. The whole mindset was, yes, things are dark, but there are better ways. And so what we're going to devote ourselves to, rather than trying to get a hold of a little bit of power so that we can control whatever little piece of earth we've been given to, it's really this mindset of like, we're going to attach ourselves to the most virtuous, principled ways to live life. Matters of faith are important for this, but the Renaissance humanists, who were most of them were Christians and devout and sincere Christians at that. They wanted to learn from the best that humanity had put forward over the centuries, and they found a lot of good in people like Cicero and Quintilian and Virgil, some of these poets and some of these writers in ancient Rome. I'm writing a paper right now, actually, on another guy. This beautiful man, Philip Melanchthon, who was himself a Renaissance humanist, and I just worked through his inaugural lecture at the University of Wittenberg in 1518, and I'm writing a little piece about it for a conference later this summer. And Melanchthon takes up these Renaissance humanists that James Hankins talks about and says, this is what I want to teach at the University of Wittenberg. And so what I want to argue for the church is that if you think that there are things going wrong in the church that you don't like, I suppose one way is to say, like, go out there and try to get yourself elected to the most powerful position that you can muster for yourself. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I certainly was involved in a lot of important conversations during my time at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis. And yet, the Renaissance humanist way, the virtue politics way, the Philip Melanchthon way is to devote yourself instead to, maybe as opposed to statecraft, involving yourself in soulcraft, pouring into other people by way of education, and letting those people then transform the world. That's what Melanchthon and Luther dedicated themselves to. They literally had no power at the University of Wittenberg. They were not guaranteed that their graduates were going to be able to serve in churches, and yet they devoted themselves to teaching theology. And over time, the church found space for them in some circles, and yet they fought long and hard. Virtue politics was a delightful read, and I thought, man, that's what I want to devote myself to. I want to devote myself to reading good books and talking about good books with people and offering them in kind of an open-handed way, rather than like forcing people by a constitution or by legislation that they must do things. There's all kinds of conversations in virtue politics about the problems with tyranny, the problems with coercion, the problems with forcing people to do things by legislation. Doesn't subscribe to any particular form of government. From a libertarian Christian perspective, I absolutely love the book.
I love your offering it. I have at least three quick things, maybe a fourth. My number four, get this. I'm going to write down four so I remember it. The Pope. Okay. Number one, first of all, as concerns your Melanchthon paper, if you need somebody to run any ideas by or the paper by as well, I don't know if you know this, but Scott Keith, my boss, his PhD studies at Oxford, Melanchthon. He's a Melanchthon scholar. So for whatever it's worth, there's a resource for you. Second of all, subtitle of this book, God bless, is it Hankins or Jenkins? I went off of it.
Hankins.
Hankins
with an H.
The use of Soulcraft. What a great word, Soulcraft.
Yeah.
What would the German for Soulcraft be, Ben? Do you know off the top of your head?
It's kind of Seelsorger.
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
Is really the old German Lutheran word for, what they would call a pastor was a Seelsorger, a carer for souls.
Yeah. Okay, so another book with a similar title, I think also in a way maybe fun crossover, is Shop Class as Soulcraft by Matthew Crawford, about 12 or 15 years old. Here's a guy out of SoCal, goes to University of Chicago, I think both undergrad, but gets a PhD there, lands at a think tank, I think in D.C., maybe even high up in the think tank, right out as this PhD of philosophy of some sort or another. Within like 6 or 8, 10 months, he bounces out of there. And he then opens a BMW motorcycle repair shop. So maybe we got a little bit of Zen and the art of...
that's a great book.
Anyways, yeah. So we got a few things going on there. But Soulcraft, he goes on there, and I think... he was basically offered like influence as the head of a think tank, right? And yet he says it was killing my soul. And so he kind of, he's talking about the nature of vocation and labor. It's a meditation on labor. I think it's highly worth our listeners, particularly if you have kids getting ready for college. This is a meditation on labor and vocation that helped me as I helped shepherd them towards college, and we're still doing that. I think that conversation is changing a little bit right now, even more with AI. We'll see. But I absolutely loved it. So Shop Class is Soulcraft. And then that also then takes me to this Roman Catholic. I'm not even to the Pope yet, by the way, but I'm typically a grump when it comes to Catholicism, when it comes to papists. I'm typically a grump then, but they do have this theology of subsidiarity, which I should read about. Subsidiarity says, it's the most local sphere. You might even say your home. And when I say the word neighbors, I'm not talking about the 8 billion people who inhabit the planet with you, because what can one do with that? I'm talking about your actual neighbors when you step out your front door. Who's to the left and to the right of you, front and back? Who are your neighbors? So this Catholic law of subsidiarity says your greatest sphere of influence, and in a sense, your most concrete callings are to these places close to home. And I wonder if, as you write about this, first of all, my understanding of Hankins' book, Virtue Politics, is not to say, hey, don't be a Ben Sass and become a senator, and don't take national office. That is, I don't think, what you're offering or suggesting, or what he is either. But certainly don't fall into the trap of thinking that sort of power is the only place where one can make a mark on the world. All too often, people who want to attain to such power, boy, we see their ugly lives all over the news, right? We see how this kind of power at times with sinful people does have corrupting effect at times. But subsidiarity comes to mind, and it comes back into mind as you explain this Hankins book, which is, as you describe it, I just think of parenting, right? Early on, I am master and commander of all things with my children. It just is. And that's just so that they don't die, Ben, right? It's been a long time since I've been there, quite frankly. Now I'm to the other end of how can I have influence with them, and I really have very little to do with a lot of their day-to-day small decisions. I still do. My kids might laugh at that if they heard me say that. But again, my kids range from 16 years of age to 22 years of age, and there's a big difference between that, 16 and 22. But the 22-year-old, I'm an encourager. I ask questions. I ask permission to challenge him, right?
Yeah.
There are things where I could put my foot down still, Ben, but this is not the way anymore if things are going well, right? Whereas when the 22-year-old was 2 years old, I put my foot down every day so that he wouldn't kill himself, so that he wouldn't drive us mad, and so that he wouldn't kill his siblings, right? So we're not, I don't think, demonizing the range of spectrum and choices, but there's a time and place for each. And when it comes to sort of national politics or synod politics, what's your footing? What's your platform? What's your plank that you're standing on? Is that a fair question? Am I framing it kind of similar to how you're thinking about some of these things?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you mentioned Ben Sass, and I think that's actually a good person to bring up. The other person that comes to mind is Paul Ryan.
Yeah.
Legislators, rulers, politicians who are known to be principled thinkers and who would be described as virtuous, that they're not going to get down in the mud and just there are, maybe you could think of a few other politicians who we actually have these conversations in culture like, well, I know this person did this, and this, but he's doing this, and it's this, well, but he's able to accomplish this, so we're going to overlook all of his lack of virtue. And, I don't want to be that kind of dad. I don't want to raise that kind of kid, right? That would say, my kid is made all these accolades, but is actually, behind the scenes a terrible human. Those that were involved in Soulcraft wanted people to go on and do important things, and we want that for our kids too. But we want them in the process to be good humans, and I would way rather somebody go after their vocation with virtue and at some point say, I'm going to hang it up, or I'm going to take a no-name position that nobody may ever know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do good in the world, than for somebody just to chase after celebrity or power as something that's worth going after in and of itself.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna get to
you go ahead. The Pope, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say I got to get to my fourth, and then I really want to, in a sense, bring this around to Bitcoin and not be too ham-fisted or wax-nosed, but nevertheless bring it around to that. Did you happen to see the most recent encyclical, Magnifica Humanitas? Your Humanitas.
I have a bunch of friends that I gather with once a month or so to read some philosophy and to drink some wine, and this is on our reading list for this next time around. I have not read it yet, but it's on my reading list.
Well, I'd send everybody, I'd encourage you to look up on YouTube at 1517. Caleb Keith gave a 15 to 20 minute response on it where he was both charitable and critical, so it was great. I happened to be on the phone the day before he recorded that when he was just being critical. But nevertheless, it's great. It's interesting. He's saying AI has this ability to take us to a more to kind of be owned by the machines, right? And the second we're owned by the machines, we're not given moral agency. We're not, there's less being asked of us, and we're handing it over to the machines. And so he maybe kind of correctly diagnoses something we should all pay attention to or even be concerned about. In other words, how might having machines think for us relieve us of our agency, whereby, now to put it in the framing that we've been talking about, sort of our virtue muscles atrophy, I guess you could say, which would be an interesting question and an interesting concern. One I could maybe say, boy, I don't know if I've exactly been thinking about that, but maybe I should be thinking about that. So the question, the concern is there, but in some of his conclusions, Ben, and here's, he suggests that for the good of the individual and the collected individuals, meaning humanity, that probably authoritarian rules ought to take control of things. It's his solution is a centralizing solution, which I found very, very dissatisfying on the one hand and concerning on the other. And I'd be interested. Maybe we'll have to table that then for the moment. But Ben, if
I'm going to watch that. I think that's a fascinating take. My friends will be amused if I bring a kind of the critique of centralization, because they know me also as the Bitcoin guy, as the libertarian, and they'll be like, "Oh, it's just Ben."
It's just Ben can find it, just like a Lutheran can find baptism and the Lord's Supper anywhere in the scriptures. Ben can find centralizing tendencies everywhere in the world. That's right. Well, I don't know if you're like searching for this and finding this under rocks. I mean, it's prevalent at points in the document. He very emphatically calls for this. And I've pulled out, I don't have it with me now, but I pulled out and looked at some of those extended quotes as well. And I'm like, oof, that is one way. That is, back to your book, that is one way to go about this. That is one way. It's interesting that, anyways, that is one way. So all that goes to the Pope. Okay, coming around to Bitcoin, other than what you think naturally connects then to Bitcoin, let's not just assume those ways, Ben. Can you enumerate any of those?
Yeah, so I mean, this in some ways comes back to this conversation that a few people have accused me of being Marxist. Why would they accuse me of being a Marxist? Because I have stepped away from kind of the place of centralized power, and I'm kind of stepping out of the system. And when people do that, I suppose one read on that is, oh, they're trying to create a revolution, and they are against all institutions. I am certainly not. I work for an institution called Pastoral Leadership Institute. It's been around for 26 years. We're not a fly-by-night startup. David, you work for 1517. It's an institution. It has donors. It has a board of directors. It has its own constitution and bylaws, and it has right. It's an organization.
Yeah,
it's an institution. So some people might say, "Oh, well, 1517 isn't, or PLI isn't an RSO, a recognized service organization. So therefore, they're just rebels and rogues." Well, I suppose that's one way to read it, but I think there are other ways to look at this. So what Virtue Politics and many other books have helped me to, I just finished reading The Sovereign Individual, and that book also is decidedly anti-Marxist, and yet isn't exactly arguing for a centralized approach to kind of status quo. So what I appreciate about virtue politics is that Hankins is lifting up people who might be willing to critique a particular ruler as being, for example, tyrannical, having tyrannical tendencies, or even being an outright tyrant. And I suppose one read on that is, oh, they're a revolutionary and they want to put themselves up in place of the tyrant. But another read on that is, no, this is actually a principled take, and I'm going to step outside the status quo and the government to offer a critique. And that, I think, is exactly what Satoshi Nakamoto did. Satoshi Nakamoto steps outside of fiat currency or the Federal Reserve or the way that America had been doing money for at least since FDR, and says, I think that there should be a different way of doing money, and I'm just going to put out this project out there. Not only did he write code, which is its own sort of way of educating people. The cypherpunks believed that they were going to change society by writing code, and that was their way of educating people. And a lot of people have since paid an awful lot of attention to cypherpunks writing code. Some of them probably were Marxists and anarchists, but some of them were really principled thinkers who championed liberty. Satoshi Nakamoto also wrote a white paper and put it out so that the whole world could read his take on here's a different system and a different way to go. He or she or they, Satoshi Nakamoto, I believe, had a significant critique of kind of statecraft as the United States was conducting their monetary policies. And there is definitely at the foundation of Bitcoin with the Genesis block and critiquing the UK and their giving another bailout, the US giving another bailout. I think Satoshi Nakamoto was critical of current status quo, but he developed a new way without forcing people to accept it. And this is the fascinating thing about Bitcoin, is that so Bitcoin's been around since 2008. So we're 18 years in, and only now are governments starting to talk about it. Everybody in Trump's government is now talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's kind of shocking, but nobody was coerced or forced to think about it. It's a good idea in and of itself, based on really sound economic thinking, that makes its own case. And it makes its own case with absolutely zero power, right? And that's what's fascinating to me about Bitcoin, is they're just offering it with a really open hand. It's open source. I mean, you can go and you can read through all of the code of Bitcoin. You can read through how it's structured. Anybody could start another Bitcoin blockchain on their own. It might not be as powerful, but actually loads of people have started up their version of Bitcoin. They tweaked it a little bit, and I would say they probably weren't as good at writing code or understanding principles of finance that Satoshi Nakamoto was. But I think Bitcoin is a beautiful project that comes in as being based in virtue, being based in timeless principles that humanity have found compelling and make their own persuasive case without the use of any power. And that's what I'm for. I'm all about persuading people without power.
Love it. I love it. All right. I asked Claude. I did not have the time to read this. I have since we
I
started,
just told you about it today.
yeah, since we started this conversation, it is available to me on audiobook from the good people, Allen County, Indiana. Anyways, there you go. Allen County Public Libraries. Shout out to you that my library card is effective all these years later. But Virtue Politics is available to me. But so I ran it through before we met through Claude and just basically said, give me a summary of the book. And then I asked, here's what I asked Claude, give a summary of the book and how it might intersect with Bitcoin. Very general. I didn't say favorably, disfavorably, but anyways, they gave me 5 things. First of all, rules versus rulers. Hankins, humanists argued that bad rulers corrupt even good institutions. Bitcoin inverts this, right? And by the way, there's a if you want to contrast with Lutheran theology at the local level, listen, every pastor who has ever served you has been a sinner. Thank God that his sin does not negate the gifts that he gives. So that's a contrast in terms of kingdom of the right and kingdom of the left, and God's good governing of his church versus the governing of the world. That's not to say we put up with gross sin amongst our pastors and the like, and we don't pray for them and we don't hold them up and encourage them. But okay, that's one. Second, distrust of elites and monetary debasement. I think that you've highlighted that for us quite well. And monetary debasement was taking place. It's interesting if we should keep studying Italy sometime. In fact, on our upcoming vacation, I'm trying to decide which Bitcoin adjacent book to take with me on vacation. And I think I have it down between the Creature of Jekyll Island, which I still have never read, about the founding of the U.S. Fed. And then what's the other one? Bitcoin is Venice, which is a collection of essays by, I think, Farrington, and I forget the second author. Forgive me for that. But anyways, it's interesting how Italy keeps coming up here. All right. 3, virtue egalitarianism. The humanists propose that virtue is open to all, not just hereditary nobles. I would say to you that I find that to be one of the grossest portions of the centralization of power. It suggests that it's so condescending. It's so condescending, Ben. The people can't be left to themselves. The children can.
It's really it's a bad view of so humans can't be left to themselves, and yet people who would aspire to governance, if they have that view of humanity, they have a double standard, which is that they are a very unique human,
right?
And they can govern over others, and that's not a very nice way of thinking about the work of government.
Yeah, it's not. And now I'm not suggesting some sort of radical individualism either, nor are you. Within the local church, which is theologically, I would say, the most substantial body that we can point to. The local church, which is a part of God's great church, singular church. But nevertheless, one of the great things about the local church is I am not left orphaned to myself. I have a God and Father who has adopted me in Christ Jesus, his Son, and now brought me into a family where I care for and contend for my brothers and sisters, and they do the same for me. But that is a very real caring and contending. It is not, there's not reach across states, across districts, across time zones. It's very imperfect, but it's very real and local. And I believe in it wholeheartedly. All right, continuing on, the limits of institutional reform. So says Claude. The humanists believed that if rulers lacked authentic virtue, it did not matter what institutions how they framed their power. It didn't matter. And finally, a civilization project. I did not even get a chance to read this ahead of time. Virtue politics charts a course out of civilization crisis towards civil liberty through reform. Many in the Bitcoin community frame it similarly, not merely as an investment. This is true. I'm reading this for the first time. This is describing me, but as a civilizational project to restore honest money as a foundation for a more virtuous economic order. There you go. Yeah. Well, this has
I love it.
been a great frame for a conversation. I downloaded it, so I'm looking forward to listening to it. It does not look like it was a small book, Ben. It looks like it was a substantial
No,
book.
it's not a small book. I will say I listened to it as well my first time through, and now I'm going back and picking up on particular arguments and such. But I found it to be really compelling. Hankins is he's connected to. It got passed along to me by somebody that I go to Acton Institute with, and
Nice.
I'm going to Acton again this summer. Hankins has a book about the Western tradition. He taught at Harvard for 40 years and left just a couple of years ago. Basically, over the issue, his charge is that Harvard is no longer interested in teaching the history of the Western tradition. So, and Hankins is by no means, he's not a racist, he's not a white supremacist, he's not any of the things that are sometimes alleged at people that would push back a bit on a full-blown approach to DEI. He's very interested in the book. Holds open lots of places where it shouldn't just be kind of the elites or those in power should stay in power. Not at all. But his concern, as I've understood it, is that there was less and less ability to actually just talk about classic sources alongside newer works and things. I appreciate anybody that's willing to say, maybe I can't serve at this institution anymore because it's gone in a direction that I don't necessarily agree with or believe in. And I mean, Hankins has landed well, and he's teaching, still writing books, very much devoted to the Western tradition, to Christianity, to how these classic sources can form humans, and not just humans that have always been in power or something like that. I found it to be a very compelling read and place for people of lots of different backgrounds and education levels to enter into the conversation. People that believe heartily in education, I think, are open to lots of people entering the conversation. I'm also reading a kind of a different take right now. I just started it. Sarah Bakewell, she wrote a book called At the Existentialist Cafe, and she's got a book now called Humanly Possible, and it's also about the Renaissance. But Sarah Bakewell is very openly an atheist, and still has interest in these things. Probably would land more left of center. Hankins would land more right of center, and yet both of them are talking about Renaissance humanists, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
Wonderful. Well, Ben, man, it's been great to be with you again. A true joy.
Yeah,
Hopefully it'll happen again soon. Yeah, I'm not sure who our listeners will get the next go round. We've got some family travels coming up, which we're very excited about. So maybe I'll get in a recording before then. If not, it'll be Jared with another or Jared with Ben. But Ben, you're welcome anytime. Glad to see you. And
always good to
I
chat.
hope California's still calling someday here for you. And
Yeah, I would love
would
that.
love to have you out sometime. So God's
That'd
blessings
be
to you,
fun.
Ben. And yeah, we do pray for our local churches as well, also for our church body that we are part of and the institutions we're blessed to serve. But finally, if a common phrase these days is go out and touch grass, and I'll just
Yeah.
add to that, go out and serve your neighbors, your actual neighbors, and enjoy doing so. Thanks for being with us on another recording of the Bitcoin Reformation podcast, that is, and have a great day.